this is Andrew, our campaign coordinator as well.
Nice to meet you. Hello, Jeremy.
Thank you all very much, and a warm welcome to Jeremy Corbyn here in Nuneaton. I ask you to give a warm welcome to Zoe Mayhew.
Hello. Firstly, I'd like to thank you all for coming today and showing your support for my campaign to be elected as MP for Nuneaton, Hartshill, Arley and Whittaker. It's good to see, I can see old friends who I used to work with and people I know from all through my life. I look forward to organising with you as we launch our community organising campaign today. And as you said, it's so important that we all get involved. An election could be called now, or in 6 months, or indeed 12 months.
Thank you so much. And thank you, Mike, for all you have done as a Member of Parliament, and all you've done for our party, and the way in which you set out what our opportunities and our ideas are this morning. Mike, thank you very much for that, and thank you for chairing today's event. And without any prior consultation, we're colour coordinated with our shirts. Can I say thank you to all of you for coming today. Thank you to Bill Olner for coming as well, supporting us today. You did great work as the MP for the area. We are going to win Nuneaton back, okay? And I have a special affection for a number of reasons. This was the town where I first ever campaigned in a by-election, way back in 1967, when there was a by-election in which Les Huckfield was elected for this constituency after Frank Cousins had stood down. And I brought a whole team of young socialists from the Wrekin for that campaign, and we knocked on hundreds and hundreds of doors, and Les was elected. We won that by-election, so that was my first encounter, if you like, and taster of it, and what a great result we had there. The other was at the start of the leadership debates in 2015. As you know, it was very easy for me to get on the ballot paper. We did it with 1 minute 50 seconds to spare, so we had 1 minute 50 seconds of break. And then we set off on the campaign, and the first hustings was the BBC hustings here in Nuneaton, in which they said this was a place that the kind of politics you're talking about will never gain any traction. What I pointed out was that, yes, we had lost supporters to other parties, primarily UKIP. We had lost people who had become disillusioned, had become unaware of what we were saying, what our values were. And I quite simply set out saying this, that we cannot just be managers of an economy. We have to challenge the austerity and the whole agenda that goes with it. And in challenging that whole austerity agenda, we give people hope, we give people opportunities, we give people a chance to unite together to achieve together, rather than divide and attack a minority, which is exactly what the politics of UKIP and the far right are all about. We've shown in that general election of 2017 that we can unite people, we can bring people together, we can bring 13 million people to vote Labour in that election. My only sadness, and it is a massive sadness of that campaign, is that we didn't quite win that election, but we came ever so close to achieving it. And I'm determined that whenever an election comes, and I don't know any more than anybody else in this room does, we are absolutely ready for it. We have our plans for the campaign. We have our plans for what will be in our manifesto. We are ready and raring to go. And in selecting a candidate, Zoe, for this constituency, you've shown your faith in a local woman, you've shown your faith in a principled activist and principled trade unionist. You've shown your faith in somebody that will truly represent this town and not be sucked away into the confines of Westminster, but will see her role there as speaking up for the people who feel shortchanged, and quite rightly so, by a political establishment that's ignored them and allowed town after town to run down, industry after industry to close, and young people to be denied the hope they deserve for our future. Thank you for taking this task on, and I know you're going to do it. Can I also say thank you to all of you for being here and the team you've got around you, and Paul taking on the duties of being agent. As one who was an agent for 10 years in many elections, all I know is it's a bit like being a goalkeeper. When you win an election, the candidate is praised and thanked and applauded. When you lose an election, it's the agent's fault. It's a bit like a match, you know. The strikers win the game, the goalkeepers always lose it. So, Paul, well done for taking it on. You're more than a goalkeeper. You're going to be an inspiration to get everybody working in this campaign. Thanks for taking the job on, and thank you to all of you for supporting this campaign. Because in a number of ways, we could be a bureaucratic structure that just runs the structures of the party, and that it's important that is there and that is done. But it's also about what we do, how we campaign, where we motivate and mobilise people. And remember now, our party membership is 550,000, biggest political party in Europe, the biggest membership I think we've ever had, certainly in my lifetime, and that is an opportunity. And many socialist parties across Europe contact me all the time and say, why is your Labour Party membership so big while our membership is falling? Well, it's not for me to comment on what's happening in other people's countries or parties, but all I do is say that what we're doing is uniting people around an agenda which is of social justice, which is of inclusion of all people, which sets out a vision on health, on education, on housing, and above all, on an investment-led economy for the future. And we do get a big resonance because that is what we're trying to do and achieve. Now, this week the Tories introduced their budget on Monday, and there seems to be one common factor that absolutely unites the Tory party. It unites the sort of free marketeers on the one end, and it unites Jacob Rees-Mogg, who was paying a visit from the 18th century to Parliament on that day, around the same thing. One is they absolutely hate the message we're putting out, and so they had a concerted effort on Monday when I was replying to the budget, all 300 Tory MPs just trying to shout me down in Parliament while I'm trying to give an answer to the budget. The reason they wanted to shout me down, and they didn't succeed, was quite simply that I pointed out that this budget is one gigantic con on the people of this country. Theresa May told the Tory party conference austerity was over. Philip Hammond apparently hadn't been told about this speech that was going to be made, and it clearly isn't. It clearly isn't over, because you look at the state of public services now, and look at the state of public services 6 years, 8 years, 10 years ago, and look at what's going to happen next year, and you see what a con this is. Have they stopped the sustainability and transformation plans in the NHS? No. Are A&E departments all over the country under threat? Yes. Is there huge concern about hospitals in Warwickshire, in the West Midlands? Yes. Have they gone away because of this budget? No. Is the funding of local authorities and the cuts they've had to endure being restored? Absolutely not. We've already got Northamptonshire County Council and Somerset County Council bankrupt, therefore slashing services, and you've got a real funding crisis in County Council and Metro counties and many others as a result of the government's underfunding. Things aren't changing. And the reality means that youth centres close, youth workers are sacked, people in desperate need of social care don't get it, those facing a mental health disaster have to wait 6 months to get any kind of support or therapy, and many on housing waiting lists all over the country wait and wait and wait and have to go into the private rented sector with all the high costs and insecurities that go with that. Is any of this necessary? No. Has austerity achieved what the government said it would? Has it rebalanced our economy? Has it led to an investment in future manufacturing and better infrastructure? No. We've got the lowest rates of investment of any of the OECD countries. We have structural unemployment, and we have particularly insecure employment with 1 million people on 0 hours contracts, and many people that I meet in my constituency advice bureau, and you'll be meeting in yours, Zoe, who are trying to balance 2 and 3 jobs in order just to survive. And last year, more than 1 million people accessed food banks across this country. Hang on a minute, we're the 6th richest country in the world. Should anybody be forced to sleep rough? Should anybody be forced to go to a food bank? Should any young person be hungry when they arrive at school in the morning, therefore can't learn? It is a Tory agenda. It is a Tory agenda that would rather give tax breaks to the biggest business, tax relief to the richest people, write off inheritance tax for those that ought to pay rather more of it, rather than invest in the people of this country. This country has become more unequal and is becoming more unequal every day this Tory government remains in office. There are so many areas of policy in which we set out, as Mike very well explained earlier on, we set out a different vision in the election and will continue to set it out. This is one of our campaign days, and the last time I checked up, which was a couple of days ago, on the number of constituencies across the country and what they're doing today, the campaign day, we had 435 constituencies all over Britain organising campaign days. My own constituency is not organising one because we've sent people to lots of other campaign days all over the London and the South East, and that I think is the right thing for us to do. And we are determined to get that message out, because we do have problems getting our message across. You may have noticed some of the mainstream media are sometimes mildly critical of me. And sometimes they say deeply unpleasant and cruel things. They've even criticised my cat. I mean, goodness, you know, that's about as low as you can get. I mean, I can take it, and I will, but how does the cat respond? It can't. El Gato is very upset about all this. But he's got plans, don't worry. He's got long-term plans to support us in electing a Labour government. But the media is attacking us because they don't want our real message to get across. And interestingly, in the general election and the time before it, where we have the most support is of people who actually don't access the mainstream media for most of their news, but use television or radio, I'm talking mainstream print media here, or those that access information and ideas online and through social media. If you remember the start of the general election campaign, we were totally written off by just about every expert on the planet, and a lot of people said, no, we're going to fight this campaign for an alternative. And many got on board straight away and got on board in getting people to register. 2 million people registered to vote during that election campaign. And do you know what? Every Tory website never once anywhere mentioned the right to register to vote during the election campaign. I wonder why. 2 million more people registered to vote, and young people turned out in huge numbers and persuaded older people to vote Labour as well, because they saw in our policies some hope for themselves for the future. And that is what turned that campaign around. And the idea that we're out there on the streets and on social media, and of course using the broadcast media when the broadcasting rules kick in and we have to have equal time. And that had a huge impact. And I've never forgotten, at the start of the campaign, I was in Manchester the first weekend, and we were travelling south from Manchester, and they said to me, you've got 2 events to go to before you travel to the south. And they said the first one you've got to call in is Warrington, and the second one is Crewe. And I said, okay, what are we doing in Warrington? This first weekend of the campaign, candidates hadn't yet been selected. They said, oh, you're just joining a few people to go canvassing and then we'll move on. I said, okay. So we were driving down these roads in Warrington, and we passed one house. There's a massive number of people and balloons outside. So I said, is there a wedding on or something? And they said, no, that's where we're going. 200 people turned up just to go door knocking. And you know what? We won Warrington South in the election. And then we went down the road to Crewe, and 500 people had turned up in the town centre just to get ready for campaigning. And we won Crewe and Nantwich because of the determination of those activists, and Laura Smith was elected fantastic MP. Well done her. So that's how we do it, by our campaigning, by our door knocking, and our interaction with people between elections on the issues of health, of education, of housing, and in investment in jobs. I'll give you a couple of examples of our policies. The National Health Service is our greatest achievement as a party. Think about it. Aaron Bevan, former miner, representing Tredegar, was determined to see that the principles of the Miners' Welfare Association and the local health association, where healthcare was provided by all at the expense of everybody else, was a good thing to do. And he then was determined in government and in cabinet to push it through. But just imagine, he's appointed Secretary of State for Health. He goes to the Ministry of Health and he tells his civil servants, we're going to introduce a National Health Service. I can only begin to imagine the advice he would have got. It's too complicated, it's too expensive, we've just been through the Second World War, nobody really wants it, the doctors are all against it, the medical companies are against it, the private hospitals are against it. Minister, it's not a good idea, I think you should do something else. You can just imagine the advice, can you? Mike's been through this, where you have very well spoken, very well trained, ever so well educated civil servants saying, well, Minister, it's a bit like this. I'm not in your shoes, but it's really not a very good idea. And then he said, no, we are going to do it. We promised the people we would do it, and we will deliver it. So in the teeth of what was massive opposition and lots of arguments about why they shouldn't do it, we delivered the National Health Service in that post-war Labour government. And I think it is the greatest achievement the Labour Party has ever made, which is healthcare free at the point of view. But that system is undermined and under threat by contracting out, by privatisation, by endless reorganisations, and we are determined to properly fund the National Health Service and to properly fund the mental health services and the social care services across the country. We do face a mental health crisis in this country. A quarter of us are going to take part in some kind of crisis during our lifetime, and we need the rest of the community to support us, but above all, we need the professional help that's there. It's no good saying to somebody who turns up at a GP surgery to say, I'm going through a crisis, I need help. So, sorry, somebody will see you in 6 months' time. For the moment, here's an antidepressant tablet to keep on taking. That is not the way forward. And yesterday, I spent the whole morning in a secondary school in my constituency, and I had a very long discussion with a group of students in the school. Very impressive they were too. And they are concerned about the stress young people face. Concerned about the stress they face over housing, the stress they face over going to university, if that's where they want to go, and the debts they'll encounter, distressed about many things in their lives, and feeling there weren't enough people around to talk to, there wasn't enough understanding of them, and it's quite a hard thing if you're a young person to say to somebody else, actually I'm having a bad time, I'm going through a lot of stress. So they've set up their own support group within the school in order to signpost people into getting professional help and services. I thought that's so good, that's so responsible, and so sensible of them to do it. And I try to visit schools every week and learn a great deal from young people about what they want to achieve in our society. But then, generally, later in life, people need social care. Not all those that need social care are old, some are much younger. But the social care crisis is huge. There's more than 1 million people waiting for social care. in our society. And you know what happens as well as I do, that if social care is not available, then somebody has to give up work to look after an older relative. It's nearly always a woman who gives up her life, gives up her career in order to care for somebody else. Of course we love our older relatives, of course we want our parents to be properly cared for, but it's got to be properly done and properly funded by all of us. I was talking to a care worker last Saturday in a street in London as we were seeing people off somewhere. And this young man came up to me and he looked shattered and exhausted. And he said, "Do you mind if I have a word with you, Mr. Corbyn?" I said, "Yeah, of course." And so we went quietly to one side to have a little chat. I said, "You all right?" He said, "Not really. I'm utterly exhausted. I need to go home and rest because I've just done already a 48-hour week as a care worker. I get minimum wage. I'm not paid for travelling between clients I see, working in the private sector. I'm not paid a sleeping over allowance for the work that I do when I'm sleeping over to look after somebody. And I'm utterly exhausted, and I've just been given my list of people to go and see next week and try and look after." And he said, "I love social care, I love caring for people, it's what I do, but I can't cope with the stress and the exhaustion and getting only minimum wage to do it." What kind of society and what kind of message is it that some of the most responsible people we've got, we ask them to look after our nearest and dearest and loved ones and give them minimum wage and terrible working conditions? I tell you what, Barbara Keeley is in our shadow cabinet for a reason, that I take mental health and social care very, very seriously. That's why it's a cabinet minister who's going to look after those issues under a Labour government in the future and make sure it happens in a better way. Thanks, Mike. Might as well have to stop or drink more water. There are many other policy areas. I won't go through all of them because there isn't really time. But two areas I want to talk about are education and in industry of the future. Education has been damaged a great deal by the breaking up of the powers of local education authorities, diminution of what they can do, and there's inadequate planning in many cases, and there is huge pressure on colleges and on universities. And in the run-up to the election, we had a very long discussion about many areas of education. And the areas that I particularly want to change is, firstly, have the principle of a national education service. The great legacy of the next Labour government will be a national education service, an overarching principle. An overarching principle that education is there from cradle to grave and is free to use. Because what we've done is increasingly turned education into a commodity rather than a right. And so, for the smallest children, from 2 to 4, we'll be guaranteeing 30 hours a week of nursery for them. That will give them the opportunity to socialise and give them the opportunity to develop. And that is what we achieved under the last Labour government with children's centres and Sure Start, which is absolutely brilliant achievement of the government. But all over the country, Sure Start centres are being closed down, and I was with some families last week in Norfolk where 23,000 people who use these centres are going to lose them completely, and 43 of the 48 across the county are being closed next year by the Tory County Council with the support of central government. And the people whose children were using those centres told me how much they benefited from them. Those going through postnatal depression, those going through stress at home, those needing support for English as a second language, all kinds of support that's needed, all delivered through an effective children's centre. It'll be a Labour government that properly funds local government to bring the children's centres back and the principle of Sure Start back into our society. But it will also be about properly funding our primary schools and our secondary schools. Too many head teachers have to send out begging letters, and some of them are a bit more than begging, they're very assertive. Some of these letters saying, well, your child's school is in difficulty, we really need you to guarantee so much money per month or per term in order that the school can provide the things it needs. Well, of course we all want to support our schools, of course we all want to support our children, of course we want to see them properly taught and have the outdoor activities and the trips and everything else that's such an important part of education. But surely the principle should be we, people, a society, a community, provide the funding for education. We don't do it by begging letters and charity. And so we will properly fund those schools. But education also is about the creativity that's there in all. And that's why I was very proud that we put into the manifesto, Tom Watson and I completely agreed on this, a pupil arts premium for every school so that every child will be able to explore themselves, be able to learn a musical instrument, be able to act, to dance, all the things that are creative, that are not a luxury add-on in education, they're part and parcel of what we are as human beings and as people, and how we develop ourselves. And then, at the other end of the scale was the expensive part, the very expensive part, the difficult part, and that is about the funding of students to go through university. As Zoe pointed out, her generation, and indeed mine, could go to university for free and get a maintenance grant. So basically, if you get into university, your choice, it was free to do so. And we believe that it's wrong to charge fees, and indeed I had a very interesting discussion with the German ambassador the other day, who was kind of puzzled about why we charge for university education at all. He said, why do you do that? I said, well, it's all a bit historic, really. But don't worry, we're going to get rid of it, and we'll do what you do, and that is provide it as a whole for the good of everybody. And so, yes, it will cost, and we will raise corporation tax in order to do it, because I want it to be a genuine choice rather than coming out of university with £50,000 worth of debt. But it's also about the way in which we treat post-school education. I want there to be genuine equality and parity between doing a vocational course or doing an academic course. Because for too long, there's been a sort of thing in Britain that you look down on somebody that does a vocational course and you look up to somebody that's doing an academic course. I don't. I see the skills of electrical work, the skills of computer work, the skills of design work done through vocational courses just as valuable as somebody doing a completely academic course at a university. We need all of those skills in our society. We don't need just the two of them. And we are determined to achieve that. But it's also about our economy for the future. Yes, Brexit is a huge issue and a problem. We've set our 6 tests down, by which we will measure whatever the government brings back in its negotiations. I've spent the last 3 years spending quite a lot of time talking to our colleagues in socialist parties all across Europe about the kind of relationship we want with them in the future. We want to trade with Europe in the future, we want a customs arrangement with Europe in the future, and we don't want to become an offshore island that's tax cutting and undercutting the rest of the continent. And we don't want to do a sweetheart deal with Donald Trump that gives us coronated chicken and investor protection. And so we will measure whatever this government brings back against our 6 tests, and if they don't meet them, then we will vote against whatever deal she's brought back. And if she can't cope, that's Theresa May, then feel free to take another walk in North Wales, feel free to take one of those lovely walking holidays and have another election. And give us a Labour government that will, through the establishment of a national investment bank, invest in the infrastructure needs of our society. Give us a Labour government that will invest in cutting-edge, environmentally sustainable technology that will develop those high-skilled jobs that are so necessary for the future. Later on today, I'm going to see GE to talk to them about what they want to do, or what we want them to do. I want those skills in rugby to be put to good use. I want to see a Swansea Bay tidal lagoon barrage built and the turbines for it made in this area in order to give those jobs. Likewise, likewise the frigates and other ships that are needed and the materials for them coming from highly skilled industries. What we've done for too long is allowed our manufacturing base to deteriorate and become just a service-based economy. And so there's going to be a lot of arguments against what we're trying to do, but I'm determined that we will go into government determined to achieve those things. Good quality public services, good quality education, an investment-led economy that strengthens our manufacturing base and above all unleashes the creative potential that's there amongst millions of our citizens, particularly our young people, to give them some degree of hope for the future. And a government that on the world stage wouldn't kowtow to Donald Trump, that would say quite simply, the abuse of human rights in Saudi Arabia and the war in Yemen are unacceptable, completely wrong, and we need to stop arms sales treaty. And we would not, absolutely would not walk away from the Paris Climate Change Accord. We would seek to strengthen it in every way that we can. We cannot turn a blind eye to the reality of climate change that's happening around us. That does mean you need a government that's prepared to be serious, not just in our own interest in our own country, but on the whole world scene, on pollution, on emissions, on global warming, and on sustainability of natural life on this planet. So these are huge and serious issues. That's why our party is so good and so creative. Our conference was the biggest we've ever held. There were 14,000 people came to Liverpool, 14,000 people, full and brimming with ideas and excitement. We had 500 fringe events and all the discussions and debates that went on there. It's that sort of creativity that brought about the existence of the labour movement in the first place. Those that stood up for trade union rights, those that stood up for women to get the right to vote, those that stood up to get the state old age pension, the National Health Service, and all the things that we value so much. That's where the strength of our movement comes from. And so when we go out campaigning, it's not just knock on the door, hello, how you doing, how you voting, yes, thank you very much, that's probably a doubtful, not sure, and move on to the next door. No, have conversations with people. Remember the last week of the general election campaign. On the buses, on the trains, in the cafes, in the pubs, people were talking about politics and talking about an agenda that we had managed to set throughout that election campaign. I just wish to God it had been 1 week more. That is what strengthens people, gives them hope. We're constantly told that we have to accept inequality, accept injustice, accept the reality of free market forces deciding our lives. Or is there a different way? Is there a better way? Is there a way that encompasses our socialist principles and values that brings about that fairer, decent, investment-led, creative society that plays our part in bringing about a more peaceful and just world? I believe there is. I believe millions of people are with us on this. We will challenge this government every step of the way on everything they do that brings about inequality, poverty and injustice in our society. We are not the party and will not be the government that walks by on the other side to a homeless person or somebody going through a crisis or a young person not achieving in school or an older person worried about their future because they've been made redundant at 55. We'll be a government that's there for all of the people in our community. Why? Because we're socialists. Why? Because we care. Why? Because we believe every human being has a contribution to make to our society. Naeem, thank you very much. Go and win it. And Exec Zoe is your MP.
Thank you, Jeremy. And you can go and do something about it now, because Zoe's going out after this event, knocking doors, and hopefully some of you will be willing to be with her. Jeremy says it's got to be all of you.